It is a scam when you don't allow everyone to operate on fair terms.
We are the Robin Hoods of sports betting. We take something back from the rich bookies and enable our customers to beat them instead.
Hi guys, Alex here and welcome to Trademate Sports Betting Podcast. Today I'm joined by golf odds compiler Michael Verity. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
How you doing, Alex? Thanks. Good to be on.
Yes, pleasure having you on, mate. It's good to have we've had maybe one or two odds compilers on in the past, so I think you're always popular type of person to have on. Give that perspective from the other side of the fence. I'm always interested to ask people like you, because I guess most people start on the punter side of stuff. Like, how did you actually, what was your journey like to becoming an odds compiler?
Well, I guess I was pretty young when I started. It was 2008, so I was 23 when I started. But I went to uni and I did like business studies for 3 years and didn't really know what I wanted to do. While I was at uni, I got my interest in betting and horses especially really grew. So it was it just picked up momentum that way. I mean, I never really thought I would I would want a job in the industry or anything like that. But I was going for like marketing jobs and a few other things when I finished my 3 years at uni, and I was getting nowhere. And I wasn't. To be fair, I was turning up for interviews, and I was like, I wasn't really too interested in it. I was just sort of going through the motions, and then I actually saw a job advert. I think it was in the Racing Post one Saturday in early 2008 for a junior golf odds compiler down in Wimbledon. And I thought, I'm gonna have to apply for this. It just looked perfect, watch sport all day, interpret stats on golf, and I was keen on my golf, but I wasn't as in love with golf as obviously I am now. But I thought I've got to go for this, so I did, and then cut long story short, I got the job, and 12 plus years later, I'm still down in London, still doing the golf odds. Yeah,
it's awesome. It's the good thing about the industry, isn't it? It's quite a welcoming industry. You don't really have to have like a certain degree or anything like that.
That's it. I mean, I don't know I'm not so sure what it's like now for sort of getting into, but back then I think it was sort of like they really sort of wanted just super passionate sports people. It turned out really well.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays is obviously, like you said, a little bit different. Is there would you have any advice for anyone who's interested in becoming an odds compiler on how to, get a job like that?
Well, I mean, looking at my own experiences, you obviously got with the golf, you've obviously got to do some crazy like late hours. That obviously comes with the territory of covering like tours in obviously the US, and then when the European tour go over to Asia, you've got to do quite a lot of, tough through the night shifts. So you obviously got to be willing to work the hours at the weekends and tough hours, antisocial hours, I guess. You've just, if you get into it young, you've just got to have a real good appetite for learning and because I mean, the firm that I've worked for, straight away I was working with some real experienced people who'd worked all over the world in betting companies, and just taking little bits of advice and things like that. You start off pretty green, you make loads of mistakes in the beginning, like anything really, I guess. And it's just sort of picking the brains of the experienced people who you work with and picking up little bits of tips and the do's and don'ts. And I guess, I mean, it's one of them things where you literally can't, I don't think you can progress without making errors and mistakes, and it's the ones who sort of just really learn the lessons from that and then refine their skills and get better. But yeah, it's I think more nowadays it's going a bit more towards the data science side of things, where I think if you can code and you're good at all the data mining and them sort of techniques, I think that'll definitely give you a step up. But yeah, I mean, at the entry level, it still is, I think, about just being really passionate and dedicated and disciplined and just willing to really throw yourself at the sport that you're going to compile.
Yeah, it's true. Mate, anything that surprised you or shocked you when you first started working as an odds compiler, or working for the bookmaker side of things?
I mean, it depends what sort of state. I guess it depends what sort of level of punter you're at when you get into it. But I was very sort of small staking and very sort of not beginner, but I was sort of intermediate level. And so straight away the sort of stakes, I guess, sort of surprise you a bit that customers will have on golfers and things like that. But you soon get used to that. I think I was just mainly surprised about the fact that it was an actual job. Sitting there in an office with like loads of similar people, just betting on all trading all kinds of sports. And that was an actual real job. It was a bit of a dream, I think, to start with. It's like, got one guy there trading sort of Spanish football, someone else doing, I don't know, some live tennis. It's just, there's just sports everywhere, and you're just like, this is real, this is happening. And that was just, it was just a bit mesmerizing to start with. But
a little bit intimidating, or?
Yeah, I guess it was a little bit when you're starting out, and you're like, I didn't even know this existed, this paradise of sport. But it was maybe a little bit to start with. But I mean, you soon knuckle down, and it becomes quite normal.
Yeah, because I guess when you're at the pub or sitting at home having a bet, like, you don't picture what's on the other side of the app you're betting with,
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it is. It would amaze a lot of customers and punters who don't really know the nitty gritty of what's being done behind the scenes to facilitate your bet being placed and settled and what have you. Yeah, it is. It's mad.
That's terrific, mate. A bit different now, though, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a bit of golf compiling then, mate. Obviously, main reason why we got you on. Obviously, within Trademate, our software, we don't have golf within the software, so it's not something we particularly talk about all the time. So you're kind of one of the first people that you are the first person that get on the show just to talk specifically about golf. So I guess a lot of the stuff we'll talk about will be reasonably basic stuff, because I assume most of our listeners aren't too involved with golf. Just to start off with, mate, like, what are some of the key metrics or pieces of news that you're looking at to create a price for golf?
I mean, there's loads of different approaches to it. I mean, I imagine all the firms are doing it slightly different to each other, but I mean, when I started, I was, it was very manual. It was sort of like the way I was sort of taught was in the start was sort of try and get your list of players into some sort of order, and then just start, putting percentages next to each player and try and get them in order like that. I mean, how you determine which player will be more likely on a given week is down to the compiler. I mean, some people put loads of emphasis on course form, others don't. I mean, I prefer to sort of, I mean, you're obviously trying to throw all the different aspects into creating your price, but I mean, I'm definitely more towards the how good is the player rather than, so I think course form can be a bit overrated. So yeah, it's a case of just, I don't try to. Maybe I did a bit in my young years, but I'm a bit more away from like the narrative aspects of sort of, the narratives surrounding players. You in the media and things, you can get a lot of momentum behind sort of stories that I don't really think matter. So about a certain player, so I think sometimes their price will go too short and things like that. So it's more like trying to remove a bit of the noise and just getting down to, here's my list of players, throw in a few little factors, things like, I'm trying to think now. I'm just babbling on a bit here. I guess what I'm trying to say is I try to rate all my players and then combine that with a few feel elements about each player, and that might move them up a little bit or down a bit on my list. And then once you've got a list of players in line, where you think is sort of your order of, I guess the Americans call it sort of power ratings. I guess you are sort of doing that. But once you're happy with to get your list of players in line, and then you just sort of, you're applying percentages to each, and then you'll need to move these around a bit so that your book obviously equals 100%. But there's a lot of noise surrounding how to price golf, but I think a lot of it is, I like to do it mainly on ability of the player on that given week. I think course form it's sexy because it comes to mind and it's easy to sort of see who's done well here in the past, but invariably I find myself wanting to be against these players on a given week. I feel like it goes too far the other way, where course form players get probably a little bit overbet.
So you're not, how much data are you using then? Because it sounds like almost like you've just got a piece of paper and a pencil.
I mean, sorry, that was sort of like my approach when I sort of first started and the early times. I mean, it's definitely become a bit more data driven now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of databases online, and there's a lot of various tools that you can use that sort of keep your ratings on a week to week basis, so you're not having to do the re-rating as much as I used to. I mean, when I first started, I really liked to look at each week completely fresh. So if there's 150 players, and I would sort of try and dedicate maybe even 3 to 4 hours on that outright and just go down it one by one and really get a fresh look. I mean, if I was advising anyone, sort of like not like a proper compiler, but just someone who's really keen on punting, that's how I think that can really help you betting if you just try and get into the habit of sort of rating players and getting them in an order, and then trying to make your book equal 100%. You'd be amazed how much, you'd be amazed how much bigger you need to make the outsiders. And I mean, basically, like a lot of outsiders in golf tournaments are probably 500 to 1,000 to 1, and really they've literally got no chance. They could be 50,000 to 1 in some outright. So it is amazing how much bigger, when you try and get your book to 100%, it is amazing how much bigger you need to make players to make them fit that 100. But yeah, talking about data, I mean, there's obviously the big one in golf is the strokes gained data, which is it's sort of equating players in relation to the average player. So how much better than the average is a certain player, and then it gets broken down into all sort of different facets of the game, all driving, approach play, putting, all the different pieces. So with that, and especially with this DFS sort of craze that's gone on now, there's so much information available to the punter. There's so much data like that. And then, I guess it's a case of using your experience to work out which pieces of the data you think are predictable. Which things you think have some sort of predictive meaning to them, and which you think is just mainly sort of week to week variance. Like a lot of putting in golf is. There's the ability of a player from tee to green is a lot more predictive of their future performance than how they perform on the greens on a given week. Just the volatile nature of putts being hold and missed, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just combining. It's a little bit. It's data and it's feel, and it's just having a good routine that sort of taps into all the little bits and pieces, and then keeping every week, obviously keeping a record of what price you were on a certain player, and just you see how a player's price just sort of evolves through time. But being good with like Excel and things like that is obviously a big benefit as well. It's so good if you can sort of see, what you were a certain week and what happened, and then what you are a month later, and just constantly sort of self-evaluating your processes. And yeah, again, I'm sorry, I'm babbling on a bit.
No, it's good, mate. It's we're getting some good insight. So you're saying that those big odds ones, like you mentioned, like 500 to 1, 1,000 to 1, 1,000 to 1. Are you saying that most of the time there's absolutely no value in there, and if anything, they're invaluable, not valuable?
Not absolutely every time. Like you'll always get a 500 shot who should probably be 250s or 200s on the main tours. You don't get much bigger differences than that anymore. It seems like main tour pricing, so PGA and Euro is a lot more efficient than it was a decade ago. You don't get many ridiculously wrong prices. I don't find anymore. But yeah, I just think that when a bookie will go 1,000 to 1 on a player, a lot of the time he could be 50,000 to 1. It's and obviously if there's 50 players like that in a field, that percentage does add up, or 500 shots that should be, if you actually looked at the true chance, they could be 20,000 to 1 or 15,000 to 1. If you've got a funny market shape where there might be 50 players in that category, before you know it, that does make it does make a difference. But yeah, I mean, you see it at the Masters every year. There's sort of 10 players who are like past winners, so they can play it until they're in their 60s and stuff. So straight away, if you've got a bookie, say, offering sort of, you get some fancy each way offerings on that week, you might have 10 places and you've only got 80 runners who've got an actual realistic hope. You can get in some really, as a punter, if you shop around, you can get in some really nice positions. Yeah, because the each way is so in your favour on those weeks.
Yeah. Okay. What are some of the irrelevant stats or metrics that you think people are looking at that, I guess that don't hold much value?
I mean, yeah, like I said, they're like freak putting performances are often the ones that you should probably be looking to put a line through, or at least, I guess this Sunday in Europe, Ross McGowan won, and I think I've been away, so I didn't watch loads of it, but I think he was gaining like silly amounts of strokes around the green and on the green. So if you're looking at that critically, you would probably say that is going to be very hard for him to reproduce that putting performance. It's so hard for that to be, become a norm for him. So you'd probably look more at the fact that his long game wasn't actually that good. And it was just that 1 in 500 week where something like that can happen. So you wouldn't be reading too much into, also the fact that, I mean, he was a good player like a decade ago, but like, he's just come out of nowhere and just had the most freak putting performance or short game performance. And it's probably very likely that his long game trend won't change. So in the next few weeks, it wouldn't shock me, or the next time he plays, he probably will revert to how he had been playing up to that week. I mean, there might be something there's also a school of thought that says that he'll gain so much confidence from suddenly producing that sort of performance that maybe other parts of his game will suddenly click, but it's unlikely.
Yeah.
Other things that are overrated. I actually think people who win tournaments do become overrated, especially like say a player wins like a sick, So if players who win playoffs are often overrated because essentially you've had the same score as whoever's in the playoff with you over the given week.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Or if you win close finishes as well, like where there's a real stacked board. So if you've got a tournament where the top 20 is covered by 3 shots or 4 shots or something, there's probably a lot of randomness in play that's enabled that winner to win.
Of course, yeah.
In the same way, like a 30-runner horse race handicap, where the winner wins by a nose and there's about 10 or 15 horses within 2 lengths of the winner. You know, if he goes too far in the handicap, he's just going to bury him for his next few starts. It becomes a little bit like that in golf. People who win close finishes, or if a player wins a couple of close finish events in a short space of time, the narrative will be that he's like become this amazing closer. When a lot of the time, again, it's just so much in those given weeks. There's so many like little breaks or bad breaks for his opponents, or you can. I think in general, I think winners do get a little bit overrated. And then on the flip side of that, obviously everyone talks about chokers and things like that in golf. Players who constantly get themselves in positions to win and then don't quite get it done. I think you find that sometimes like that narrative can build and it can be quite unfair. Like their actual performance in relation to the field on those Sundays, the final rounds, is actually quite solid for their level. But they just keep running into a player who has a freak day. And that could happen 5 or 6, 10 times in a row. Before you know it, everyone's calling them a bottle job or a choker. When really, you know that they're not actually doing much wrong. They're putting themselves in position and variance is hurting them.
Yeah.
And so if the narrative builds up about players like that, I often find myself, maybe even wanting to bet them a bit if they go too far that way, where everyone thinks, he can't win. He never finishes it off. He can't win. It's a dangerous, especially for a competitor, it's a dangerous sort of view to have, that someone definitely can't win or he always chokes. I find it feels like you've got to have a bit more of an open mind than that. And obviously you're dealing with like a sample of 5 or 6 events. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's a real small sample, really. If a player choked 100 events, then you might have some sort of basis to it. But when it's sort of 6, 7, 10 events, really, that's not actually that many in the grand scheme of things.
No,
so I think chokers. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think winners. It's like winners and chokers can almost they go a certain way because it's fashionable, but I think it can be quite savvy to maybe oppose the winners and get with the supposed chokers in some events.
That's really interesting. So like you talked a little bit about putting and how you think it's, there can be a little bit of luck there involved too. In those like instances where you might think that someone's putting's been, I guess, overrated, or they've just been lucky on the weekend, like, do you think a lot of it might be down to like their psychological profile, like how they've been, I don't know how much you follow it, but like, I don't know, listening to a golfer at a press conference or, some kind of interview or something like that? Like, are you ever tracking things like that and going, all right, he seems like, from the interview, he seems like he's in a good headspace. Most likely he's going to putt well this weekend or anything like that. You get what I mean? Or is that a bit ridiculous?
I mean, there definitely will be people who think that what a golfer says has some sort of value. But in my experience, I actually think it might even be the other way, that whatever a golfer says, I often think that like golfers, what they say and what's actually happened can be 2 quite different things. It's just how they're perceiving it inside. Like, what you'll often see is. Here is players like when they've had a good round at a course, I really like it here, blah, blah, blah. And again, a lot of that can just be, I think a lot of it is just, variance and round to round randomness. I don't really think, I wouldn't say ignore what they say, but it's a little bit like listening to like sometimes horse trainers and jockeys and things like that. Again, like when you've just won a race, or if you've just shot a 63, I think it's very likely that what you say you were feeling is actually different to the reality, if you get what I mean. It's like it's probably like you're speaking from sort of almost like a state of euphoria where, you know, you're so happy that you've just shot the 63 or in the first round. Then you probably attribute it to some reason that's not really even actual truth, if you get what I mean. It's like, it's hard to explain, but like, yeah, I think what golfers say after rounds is some, I mean, there are some players, really experienced players who probably aren't as susceptible to their own biases as maybe some of the younger players or something like that. But yeah, what golfers say and what is actually real, I think, can be sometimes quite different things. So, I mean, long story short, yeah, I wouldn't pay too much attention to what golfers say after rounds and things like that. Or the key bits of info you want from a player are probably like their schedule, where they're playing next, things like that. Things like if they've changed coach or something like that, that would be something where you would want to then monitor their performance. You know, if a player's in a real bad slump and he changes something crucial in his backroom team, or he does something really different to what he has been doing, that would be when I'd be, you know, observing what goes on in the next 3 or 4 tournaments, because then you could see, like, if you do see a complete change in his strokes gained numbers, you could say that has some sort of predictive value to it, because he's made a change and it's worked straight away. You probably want to watch it for a couple of weeks. But I think that sort of thing is the only sort of chance that I would really listen to or really be interested in what they're saying.
Yeah, okay. Is there a word, I mean, you probably mentioned this already, or at least mentioned a few. Is there kind of like a worst, if you could sum it up, like your worst nightmare, I guess, when it comes to golf compiling? Is there a situation where I guess it's never really favourable, or at least a lot more favourable from the punter side of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, then with the majors, there's a real in the industry in the UK anyway. There's a real like competitiveness for each way betting. So often in the 4 majors, you'll get firms that offer sort of 7, 8, 9, 10 places. And obviously a lot of, you know, you feel like you've got to sort of at least be competitive with that. To, you know, to display obviously a good offering for yourselves that week. But what you do then is you get yourself in a position where it's very hard to win on the place part of the bet, on the place book, because you're often, I mean, just mathematically, you just, it's very difficult to sort of, I mean, obviously you can get fortunate weeks where everyone who you've opposed misses the cut and things like that. So it can work for you. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like plus CV, it's definitely, it's good for the punter that week, and it's tough for the compilers and the companies that week, just because of how overbroke your place book is.
Yeah, so that's more so just the case when it's majors.
Yeah, I mean, and even in the regular weeks now, like firms are up towards 7, 8 places, like in certain firms are. So, I mean, again, week to week, they must you know, face a real challenge to win on the place book. But obviously, I guess they see it as like as a chance to, you know, be really stand out from the crowd, and obviously punters do like to look for who's offering the most each way places. So yeah, it's weighing it up. It's obviously a little bit of marketing, and you'll get more punters in. You'll probably get some new sign-ups and things like that through that. But the same on the other side of that, it's hard to win on your place, but when you're offering such favourable terms for the punter.
Yeah.
He said then any other nightmares. It's very difficult when you have a tournament where there's, like, they call it a co-sanctioned event. So you have players from 3 or 4 different tours all playing in the one event. So from a compiler's perspective, that's where it gets quite challenging to sort of equate what that form's worth from that tour with what the form from. So you do find that them weeks are particularly challenging because it's hard to find players that have obviously played in all four sort of places to sort of use as a little bit of as a guide to rate people off. So those, I mean, having said that, those weeks are often like the end of the season, and so turnover isn't crazy anyway. But yeah, it's that from actually just putting numbers on your page, that's one scenario that's quite tricky. And again, similar to that, it'd be like you'll have some like smaller tours in America where there's a lot of maybe like young players who've never played in a pro event before, and maybe even a few like good amateurs who get invites. So those are the times when you've actually got to do a bit of groundwork yourself and actually do a few Google searches and find some scores that they've been shooting in, like the amateur events that they've been playing in. So that can be quite challenging because you're obviously having to do a lot of digging, and then you're trying to work out what does a 66 in an amateur event equate to in the when you put it into the context of this event that they're going to play in the pro game.
Okay.
So there's things like that can be quite tricky. But I mean, they're tricky, but that's actually one of the more like sort of interesting parts of it. Trying to sort of just basically finger in the air, but like just put a value next to a player who you know very little about.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
It's challenging, but it's enjoyable.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I guess it's maybe a little bit of a different scenario when you're at work and you really get to hone in on your skills and have a crack. It must be interesting when you come up with a price to then, go and look at all the other books and see what they've done.
Yeah, they're the ones that you do see the biggest discrepancies on.
Yeah.
So there could be a player where you've seen something in an amateur and you make him, I don't know, 50s, and someone else might make him 250s. And that's when you do get the big differences.
I mean, if say that was a situation, is that like a situation you'd be like, all right, well, would you almost, I don't know if you would, but would you side with the guy at 50-1 and go, all right, well, there must be something in that 250-1?
I think as a compiler, what you do then is you go, well, why are we so different? Let's have a look. And some of the times you'll look at it straight away and you'll be like, yeah, I'm too big. But a lot of the time you go, no, there's no way he's a 50s chance, and at least hold your 250 until you take some money at it, which you invariably do, because there are a lot of punters out there who just look at the big differences and they go, and they have no view on the event, but they will go, well, they're miles bigger than them. Let's bet that one.
Do you think that's a viable strategy?
I'm not, honestly. I wouldn't even know. It's not something I do. I wouldn't know. I mean, you would think there must be you think there would be a little bit of margin in it. I mean, I think in this day and age now, with our competitive markets, if you're taking best price all the time and you have all the different accounts, it does feel like just by taking best price, you can't be, it feels like you must be a little in front just by doing that over the long term,
Of course.
I mean, I don't know but it's, so if you're 250s and they're 50s, what invariably happens is you might cut to 150 and they might push out to 100, and before you know, everyone's 125s.
Exactly.
It does have a way of correcting itself, and it's interesting, those sort of scenarios.
Yeah. And what sort of, for news and stuff like that, what are some of the sources that you're using? I mean, because it's obviously a lot of the time like you've said, you're tracking players from different tournaments, different leagues, all this kind of stuff. Like, what are some of the best news sources that people can use?
I'm mainly Twitter, so just over the years, I've just followed that many accounts that have some sort of stake in golf, or like the players or journalists. I mean, I wouldn't really like just use like the internet. I mean, like I said, then Google's good for like those college events and things like that. And there's some good college websites in America that that have all the results from like the top end collegiate stuff.
Yeah,
that's always good to keep an eye on the collegiate stuff, because in a year two's time, then players are going to be out on either the Corn Ferry or the PGA Tour, and if you've got a heads up on some of these players, then that can definitely be to your advantage. But yeah, as you probably know, Twitter's just incredible, isn't it? Really,
well, you're not the first person to say that, mate. I mean, off the top, I mean, there's plenty of people that have said it, but I mean, yeah, we have a guy that comes on the podcast every week, Pro Sports Better Haru, and he said that's like, well, you know, he just follows market movements, and he said it's one of the main tools that he uses, at least when he first started. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you follow, and again, you can refine your own account so quickly, can't you? If someone's providing no value, then you just get rid of them. But I mean, like I said earlier, DFS golf is so crazy. Like, they're so enthusiastic. You know, there's people writing about golf now all day, every day. It's, if you follow the right accounts, you can get. And I think a lot of the time they don't really realise what information they're giving out for for free. A lot of the time, you're like, as a compiler and a punter, you're like, this is brilliant. I mean,
it's the same. It's the same in football too. Like the team lineups. I mean, that's like although, you know, compilers or, you know, bookies are, if it's an APL or a, you know, whatever big league you want to call it, you know, they're working at the same speed as you in terms of dropping the odds if, you know, two big players are injured. So if you're quick enough, you can have a crack at it too, and it's that's free information. And like,
when Twitter first started, like, I think was it about 2008, something like that. So there was when I first started, I was doing a few different sports, and I used to do a bit of football and a bit of European football. I used to trade it live, but there used to be this one account that was called TX Odds Moves, and it used to get like European team news about an hour and a half before kickoff, and just tweet it out. It was like an automatic thing, and it would honestly tweet out big team news in some of the French second leagues and things like that.
Wow.
And it would be half an hour before the books moved the price. It was incredible. So, and I don't know. I mean, eventually the edge sort of dried up, but for a long time, you were getting really, really, like, prices were moving like 25 cents sometimes, you know, just on a key player being out. And if you had this, it was just an automatic Twitter account. I mean, I don't know what the sort of the purpose was of it, because it was giving such good value to, and it didn't have that many followers either. So it was particularly lucrative for a good time. But yeah, I mean, like most edges, eventually they dry up a bit, and you have to go and look for something else. But no, that was incredible. It was really important team news. Probably half an hour before all the books had moved their prices, so you had plenty of time to do what you want, really. Yeah.
Golf betting in general, like you've said many times on this podcast already, like, it can be pretty high variance if like, you know, if you're just your standard punter, or maybe you're quite advanced and you have an edge. Like, how many selections do you think they should be looking at ideally per tournament? Do you think it's good enough? Like, I mean, it's going to take a while for your variance to ride out if you're betting on, you know, one selection each tournament at 100 to 1, etc. But do you think there's like an ideal number of selections per tournament?
No, I don't think there really is a rule for it. But I think it's obviously, I mean, the number of bets I have in a given week on a tournament is usually down to the favourite's price, I guess. I mean, if the favourite's price is right and the top of them, you can obviously have events where you just think pretty much no one's out by that much where you want to even get involved. But obviously, if there's events where if the favourite's way too short, then that'll often mean that I'm looking at betting a few outsiders, and that can be probably anything from 2 to 6 players pre-event. And then if you find an event where you think the favourite's, you know, massive value, it might be that he's the only person you bet that week in that event.
Right.
So it's hard to have a rule for it. and again, I think you build that up over time. I think if you say to yourself, I'm going to have 5 bets in this tournament, I don't know if that's that prudent, because you'll find a week where you'll really like 3 prices and you're just having 2 for no reason. There might be a tournament where you found 10 proper differences and you're restricting yourself to 5 bets. So I wouldn't have a number that I'm trying to, specifically bet every week. And obviously that's where it's difficult for tipsters, I guess, because they sort of say, these are my 5 or 6 tips this week, and they do it every week, when some weeks maybe 2 or 3 of them are just sort of, they're not fully behind. They just think that's the structure of the column. I need to do it like that. So it's, I wouldn't say there's any hard and fast rules. Then, like I mentioned earlier, the majors is probably that'd be one where you want to, make sure that you can take advantage of all the different firms, like enhanced places. That might be a tournament. Like the Masters could be an event where somebody wants to have 10 bets, and that sounds a lot, but with the mathematics of the place, it can be quite a sensible thing to do.
Yeah.
It's hard to say there's a rule for how many, a specific number to bet every, and obviously like other markets like first round leader and things like that. That's a market where I feel like you want to, personally anyway, when I like someone, that is usually I like 4 or 5 players at big prices, and I do, I would do that most weeks. That's a market that I like to have a bet in, the first round leader. Like volatile scorers. So
that was going to be my next question. Was like, would you rather, stay away from, I guess, the outright markets and maybe bet, other kind of niche market? I mean, it's not really maybe a niche market, like who's going to be leading after round 1, but your matchup bets and stuff like that, which might have a little less variance. Would you be more?
Yeah, I don't do a lot of that myself. I mainly stick to outrights and first round lead and a lot of revised markets. So in between rounds, I think that's sort of one place where I find like that's one place where I sort of like to have a good go. Prices that have been revised after day 1, like overreactions, things like that. So, a lot of time, like players who've been priced quite highly in the outright will shoot a good score and they'll probably go too short in the betting. We can sometimes, if that happens to 3 or 4 players, you can sometimes find a bit of value on some of the other players. Opposing players who have really low rounds in round 1, opposing them in like round 2 balls and 3 balls and things like that can be quite decent. I think it's like if a player's 500-1 before the tournament and they shoot a 64, it doesn't mean he's not. I mean, obviously his win price has come down, but his actual rating, I don't feel like you want to change that too much round by round. It's again, like I'm saying, like that 64 is probably the result of a lot of variance, usually a lot of put-in variance. So I think if you think that someone who shoots a 500-1 shot who shoots 64 in the first round is all of a sudden a pre-tournament 100-1 shot, then I think you get yourself in a little bit of trouble there, because players' ability doesn't change over 18 holes really, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. No, I get exactly what you mean.
It's I think once you've set your rating sort of thing for a player in a given week, that for me that's his rating for the week really. And there's only a certain few exceptions where you'd be wanting to change that. Maybe a player who's been injured for 2 years, who you were unsure of pre-tournament, and then he has 2 or 3 good rounds. Then, someone who's achieved a lot in the past, you might then sort of alter his rating before the last round or whatever. But yeah, it's very few and far between when that happens.
Yeah. What about big name golfers? So I mean, your famous ones like Tiger Woods and stuff like that, were they, I mean, it's obviously not that relevant nowadays, but like how much do you think those big name golfers, because I mean, do you I guess I equate it to something like mixed martial arts or something like that, where Conor McGregor's always going to probably be underpriced or or overpriced, however way you want to put it, because he's going to get a lot of recreational money. Do you see a similar thing in golf, and would you kind of maybe stay away from the likes of those big names?
Not so much stay away, but you're right. That I mean, certain players, the ones that stick in mind are like obviously Tiger, Phil Mickelson, Spieth. Spieth's been struggling for a long time now, and really his price doesn't really line up with the quality of his golf. You know, he's still being priced up because of his name a little bit. But yeah, I don't think you want to run away from those players, but you do have to bear in mind that you can as a compiler you can often lay those players. You're gonna almost take money on them regardless of what number you hang up. So you've got to you do bear that in mind when you're putting your prices up, because maybe you don't certain players you don't need to offer true odds. Well, I mean, it's only your theoretical true odds anyway. I mean, someone else might think their value that week and want to smash them. But yeah, I mean, that comes from sort of experience, I think, and understanding who's going to be bet this week. Because again, you have to factor that into it just for your own liability management. You've got to think, this is what I think the true odds are, but this is what I think the market's going to be. And do I just want to be top side of the market? You know, you don't need to be the price that you were going to be. There's a lot of feel to that. It's understanding. And again, it's like understanding the narratives around tipsters and things like that. Who do the tipsters put up a lot? What's the storylines going to be this week? There's an awful lot to it. But yeah, some of the big name players, you don't need to be as big as maybe they ought to be. Yeah.
And mate, my last golf related question, and I think you've touched upon this already a little bit, just more so about golf courses. Do you think, I mean, how much do you look into them, and do you think that, can you think of any maybe curious stats off the top of your head, from particular courses where you think maybe a bookmaker misses them or a punter misses them, and it's not something that, people they miss an opportunity basally? Or do you think it's kind of a fallacy that, people should be looking at golf courses?
I mean, like I said, I think it's people overdo it, if anything. There are certain courses. Sometimes the courses at altitude, when you look through the data of them, it does seem like there's some sort of predictive nature to them. Again, it's hard to totally drill down into, but I think my sort of rule is that if anything, course form will be over bet. So on a given week, I find myself wanting to oppose people, and even recent form as well. Recent form can be, if someone's got a line of top fives next to their name and they've had form at the course, you just know that everybody and the dog's going to want to be on them that week. So you have to think about that when you're putting your price out. Usually the tendency is to want to oppose really hot course form, because the punter's got to realise that this isn't hidden. This form isn't hidden. Every compiler in the world can see it as well.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's usually in the price and over factored into the price. So whilst a lot of the time, you're going to probably get a return for some of these bets, they're definitely negative long term.
Yeah, in the long, yeah.
I feel. But yeah, it's that'd be. I think course form is slightly over bet. Yeah, that's a.
Yeah, cool. All right, mate. I've got some general questions for you to finish up.
Sure.
I'd love to know your opinion on this, but what do you think of the overall business models of the European bookies?
How do you mean by that? So do you mean are you talking with regard to restrictions and things like that, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's kind of the
soft book sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess that's the hot topic of, debate always, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
I usually like to leave this to more experienced betting industry folk, but I mean it's one of those things, and it's like I think everyone when they're starting out doesn't really understand that you could ever be restricted. It's just betting, but I I see it from all sort of angles of it now. I see it as sort of part of the game. It's I mean, I still think obviously it feels like most recreational punters have got a really I hear this a lot, but it's probably true. They've never had it as good as it is now. With all the the competitive nature of the markets. You're getting so much for your money now. Price boosts, enhanced bits and bobs all over the place. I wouldn't have a massive view on it. Like I said, I would usually leave that. I mean, I like to be educated on it myself as well. I don't really know what the perfect model is. Maybe the current model where some shops get restricted and a lot of recreational money is accommodated fine. Maybe that is actually the best model. I'm not sure. And obviously, I listen to a lot of the American guys, the big names in their sort of betting. On like the American betting Twitter, and I listen to a lot of podcasts as well, and obviously it feels like they're like in the situation that the UK was maybe 10 years ago or something, where they're all whinging about restrictions and things like that. Like, it feels like it's almost like the ship sailed in Europe a bit.
yeah,
I don't really know what the the optimal model is. I mean, obviously, if you knew that, then I'm sure you could. It would be pretty lucrative to whoever can think of something where, I guess shops get accommodated more. But I don't know. I don't know. It's difficult. Firms have got to run really prudent businesses, and it's difficult. What do you think about the European model?
yeah. I mean, I just think there should be a little bit more clarity, I guess.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, mate. I could go on all day about all the things that you'd love to see, like in terms of terms and conditions, like having just clearer guidelines on exactly, like maybe some kind of limit sheet, more transparency. But there's obviously something to the fact that there's, a handful of sharp bookies that'll take limits of tens of thousands of dollars on certain events, and the fact that there's hundreds of soft bookies on the other hand that'll take $10, then they'll limit you down to $1 kind of thing. So there's obviously a reason why there's hundreds of them and there's only a couple of the others. Like, it's obviously a very it's obviously effective because there's a few of them, and they're like the likes of Pinnacle and stuff like that seem to be doing really well. But I guess it's a bit more of a safer option, I guess, going the other route. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business, isn't it? And
it's a real complex topic, isn't it?
Yeah, I think overall, if you had to sum it up into what people would want, is transparency, like just a little bit more honesty, maybe, like, I don't know, like just so you get to the situation where, I sign up at whatever bookmaker it is, and exactly at what point am I going to be limited down to what stake, what they don't like, what they, those kind of things, and then maybe people would be a bit more happier. But it's a business, isn't it?
and obviously, like, I mean, as a sort of like experiment, it would be interesting if it was just a free for all. But I don't know what that would obviously throw up loads more new dynamics as well. Anyway, obviously some firms would really struggle. If it was if every punter could have everything they ever wanted on any market, it's.
And the funny thing is imagine if everyone turned to the Pinnacle model, how it would be. I mean, theoretically, maybe it wouldn't be, but it would be a lot harder to back winners. Like in the long run, that is. So
this is it.
Then people would be complaining about that.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, yeah, I do. Yeah, there is some really clever people in the industry who speak about it, and they do say, like, whilst a lot of shops get disgruntled with being restricted, they've probably never had it as good as it is now. It's hard to think like that, but you know, if you've got a good network of people who can sort of get bets on for you or whatever, yeah, it might actually be that this is the most optimum it has been for shark punters now, even though it doesn't actually feel it because a lot get restricted. I don't know. It seems to pivot all the time as well, and there's a yeah. I don't know. It's tricky to have a real definitive answer to it.
Yeah, no, of course. And on that kind of topic, is there anything you would like to see change in the gambling industry? If you could choose maybe one thing, or maybe you don't want anything changed at all.
I mean, I don't know if this is sentimental, but like when I was first getting into it as late teens and at uni, obviously the betting shops were in the north of England, the betting shops were really proper places to go for like a young man just absolutely obsessed with sports and betting. I mean, there was a real good feel in a lot of these shops, and you go in them now and it's like a different world. It's just there's very little sort of community feel to it now. It's obviously the FOBTs and all that, but yeah, there doesn't feel like there's the sports fanatic in there anymore. It just feels like it's quite a sad place to be. It'd be. I mean, again, I don't know how we would ever get that back, but it would be great if the. I mean, obviously, like you go to a place like Australia, and the TABs on the side of the pubs and things like that. That they're brilliant places to be in.
It's an atmosphere.
Yeah, that's it. I think at the end of the day, betting is entertainment for the vast majority of people. You obviously want people to do it responsibly, but if you don't lose a lot and you're getting a really good entertainment for your 3 or 4 hours in a betting shop that someone might spend on a Saturday afternoon, like that's great, but yeah, it doesn't feel like it's like that anymore in the betting shops that you go in. It's pretty desperate. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I think, like you said, a little bit more clarity maybe. It'd probably be nice if deposits and withdrawals were a bit more uniform across companies, so customers knew where they stood. But yeah, I mean, who's to say it's not being run to quite optimally as it is. It always feels like you often fall into that trap of thinking, everything can be better all the time, but maybe it's like we're saying there, maybe it is. It's the best it's ever been for punters.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but no, I mean, what do you have any sort of ideas of what you other than what you've said, I guess?
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, you immediately think when you say, one thing that you would change in the gambling industry, the first thing you think of is, let me bet more money. So, I mean, I guess that's if someone asked me the question, that would be my first thing. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a complicated topic, but I really do like your answer about, changing the atmosphere or, getting back to I guess the old days, you want to call it, like in the betting shops.
I'm not sure even how you would try and go about that either.
Turn the internet off, mate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brilliant, like you said, in Australia. Like, I mean, I've only just moved back, so I haven't been for a year or two. But the atmosphere at a pub or that has a TAB operator, on a Saturday or probably mostly a Saturday when the horses are on, like it's a atmosphere that can rival going to the racetrack. Like it's really good fun because you've got 50 or so people, or maybe a bit more, in one room, just screaming at a TV. It's good fun.
Yeah, I remember when I was at uni, I would go to the lectures in the morning, and then the afternoon I would just be in the bookies, and the number of like brickies and things like that would come in at like 3:00,
Yeah,
and then they bet like the last 2 hours, and they're like pretty knowledgeable people as well. Like there was definitely some sharp bricklayers in Leeds. But now that there was probably 10 of them, and it's just, they're all betting the same. Like, there was one guy who was sort of like the brains behind it, and then they'd all stand there, they'd be roaring at the TVs, and it was brilliant. And you could tell they weren't like overstaking or anything. It was just a genuine like, hobby for them, just to have a couple of bets in the afternoon before they finished or whatever. It was really good fun. And everyone in there was talking to everybody else. It was a good time, to be fair.
Yeah. No, that's great, mate. I mean, yeah, it's the exact same over here. That was like my first experience walking into a TAB here. It's just your first thing you see is the high vis, and a bunch of blokes sitting there at 4:00 in the afternoon having a beer together and betting on the horses. So
yeah.
I mean, it's obviously a lot different nowadays, but maybe one day, mate. Maybe one day. Maybe there'll be something different. There'll be something different in the future, and we'll be looking back and saying, "Remember the old days where we used to just go to your mate's house and bet on your phone?" You always seem to be doing
that. Remember the past. We always seem to be looking back to a better time in the past. But maybe that's just what happens. I think as you get older, isn't it? It always feels like it was better in the previous decade.
Oh, it always is, mate. Always is. But mate, no, that's all I had for you today. I really enjoyed. I think there's lots of stuff to chew over for everyone in terms of the golf stuff, and enjoyed talking about the more general stuff about the industry towards the end. Mate, where can people find you if you want to promote yourself at all and some of your work?
I wouldn't advise following my rabble on Twitter, but at Michael Verity. But now, if anyone ever wants any chat on golf or betting, just get me on there. That's great, mate.
Yeah, no worries at all, mate. And thanks for coming on, like I said.
No, pleasure.
And of course, thanks for listening, everyone. Make sure you do a quick rate and review of the podcast. Subscribe to us wherever you listen. And if you're looking to implement some of the strategies, obviously, like we said at the start, we don't really have golf in the software currently. So, any of the value betting kind of strategies that we talked about today, you can obviously start a free week trial of Trademate Sports and start your value betting journey, mate. But Michael, mate, thanks once again. We'll have to catch up soon.
Yeah, thanks. Cheers, mate. See ya.